So my article in this contribution is called "Have We Reached a Tipping Point? The Mainstreaming of Euroscepticism in the UK." And there's no doubt that since 2013, when David Cameron promised a referendum on British membership of the EU, we really have, I think, reached a tipping point where we've seen Euroscepticism, opposition to the EU, become increasingly mainstreamed. How have we reached this point? Well, I think there are a number of historical variables which would point to explanations for this. First of all, the English Channel, I think, is very much seen as a psychological and a physical barrier. And I think that's kind of turned us away from Europe in that kind of physical sense. We also have a history of Commonwealth and empire, and I think that historically the UK has got its cues from its historical evolution rather than from the European Union per se. There's also the language barrier, the special relationship with the USA, and also our Second World War experience, which was very different to France and Germany. Both countries that were very much scarred by their Second World War experience, and the UK was not occupied and came out on the victorious side. And I think that's also had some influence on the way we view Europe. But it's not just the historical variables that I think account for why the UK has become so Eurosceptic as a nation as such. I think there are a number of key external turning points in the debate about Europe and in the evolution of the European Union. First of all, there's the Maastricht Treaty, when the European community becomes a union and becomes much more politicised. And this galvanises Eurosceptics, not just in the UK, but across Europe. And then we have the 04 enlargement, which I think allows Eurosceptic politicians to make a link between immigration and the European Union. And then we are now undergoing the economic crisis, and we're still digesting what the consequences of that are. But there is no doubt whatsoever that the crisis has contributed to an increased sense of scepticism, I think, across the United Kingdom, as rational choice, if you like, economic arguments in favour of Europe have become increasingly questioned in the economic crisis period. So historically, Britain has a public opinion which is hostile to Europe. We have political parties like UKIP, which have emerged recently. They got 27% of the vote in the 2014 European election. It remains to be seen how they perform in the forthcoming general election. We've seen splits within the British Conservative Party. Increasingly, the new intake of Conservative MPs seem to be more Euro-hostile than Euro-centric. But I think perhaps the main point I'm trying to get across in this article is about the media and the role of the tabloid press in particular. Because what we have in the UK compared to other European nation states, I think, is a particularly hostile tabloid press. Historically, we know that Rupert Murdoch, the owner of News International and newspapers like The Sun, has always been hostile to the evolution of the European Union. And more recently, papers like The Sun have been joined by the Daily Express, which, emboldened by the economic crisis a few years back, has embarked on a Britain out of Europe campaign and is now endorsing UKIP at the forthcoming general election. A weekly column, Farage on Friday, a £1 million donation by their owner, Richard Desmond, to the Daily Express, has really helped to mainstream Euroscepticism, I think, within the press, within the UK. And this is different, I think, to other European nations where I think Europe is perhaps portrayed in a more balanced perspective. So have we reached a tipping point? I think the answer to that question is yes. I think it's more likely that we will have a referendum on EU membership for the UK within the next 5 years. I would not like to predict the result, but it's a difficult one to predict. There's always this aspect of a punishment trap where people just vote against the incumbent Prime Minister. And so the yes vote in favour of membership is far from certain. It's far from a given. And of course, the implications for the UK of coming out of the EU are not just implications for the UK itself, but these will raise massive questions for the whole of Europe and for the future of the European project.